It was a cold morning, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes even the city feel silent for a moment. On the corner of a crowded street, amidst the hum of engines and hurried footsteps, stood a young woman. Her fingers trembled as they strummed the cracked strings of an old guitar. The sound wasn't perfect, but there was something about her voice, raw, honest, and full of emotion, that made those few notes echo through the chaos. People passed by without stopping. Businessmen with their coffee cups, students with earbuds, mothers hurrying their children along. Some tossed a few coins into her open guitar case, never once meeting her eyes. She would nod gently in gratitude each time, her lips curling into a tired smile. But behind that smile was a story, one that none of them knew. Once she had dreamed of standing on a real stage, the kind with golden lights, roaring applause, and a microphone that didn't squeak when she sang. Her voice had been her treasure, her gift, her promise of a better future. But life has a way of changing plans. Now the pavement was her stage, the city's cold wind was her spotlight, and her songs, soft, broken yet beautiful, carried her pain, her memories, and the faintest flicker of hope. Each lyric she sang wasn't just music. It was a confession, a piece of her soul. Her song that morning spoke of love, of dreams that faded, and of promises that time forgot. It drew a few curious glances, but most people still hurried on. Then, as the last note trembled in the air, she noticed someone, a man standing a few feet away. He wasn't walking past. He wasn't scrolling through his phone. He was simply listening. The woman lowered her gaze, almost embarrassed. No one had really listened in a long time. Once upon a time, that name meant something. Whispered in classrooms, written in program sheets, called on stage during small-town music festivals. People used to say, "That girl can make you cry with just one song." She wasn't born into wealth or privilege. Her world began in a quiet neighborhood at the edge of town, the kind of place where dreams were small because life was hard. Her father worked long shifts in a noisy factory, coming home each night covered in dust and oil. Yet no matter how tired he was, he always asked her to sing. "Sing for me, Clara," he would say, smiling through the exhaustion. And she would. Her soft, golden voice filled their tiny home, chasing away the weariness of another long day. Her mother used to hum along, stirring a pot of soup, as her father sat back in his chair, eyes closed, letting her voice carry him away from the weight of reality. Her father believed in her more than anyone else. He saved every coin, skipped meals, and worked overtime just so Clara could attend music lessons in town. He used to tell his co-workers, "My girl is going to stand on a big stage one day. You'll see. She'll make the whole world listen." And for a while, it seemed like he might be right. Clara's teachers praised her talent. Her voice, clear and emotional, could silence a crowded hall. She began performing at small recitals, earning polite applause and the admiration of her peers. Her dreams felt real, close enough to touch. But dreams, no matter how bright, can be fragile. When her father fell ill, everything changed. The man who had carried her hopes on his back could no longer even lift a cup of water. The bills piled up. The doctor's visits grew more frequent. Clara stopped attending her classes to care for him. Music faded from her days, replaced by the sound of coughing, the hum of hospital machines, and the ache of helplessness. One night, as the rain tapped gently on the roof, her father called her to his bedside. He looked weaker than ever, but his eyes still held that same glimmer of pride. "Clara," he whispered, "don't let the world silence your song. Promise me you'll keep singing, no matter what." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. He smiled, and that was the last time he ever heard her sing. After his death, the house felt hollow. Her mother, broken by grief, rarely spoke. The savings her father had set aside were gone, spent on hospital bills. The piano he'd bought her was sold. The lessons stopped. And soon Clara realized that dreams didn't pay rent or feed the hungry. So she packed her father's old guitar, the same one he had played when she was a child, and left for the city. The city was nothing like she imagined. It was loud, fast, and cold. People didn't smile back. The air smelled of smoke and asphalt. But somewhere among the endless faces and streets, she hoped she could find a new beginning. At first, she tried everything, handing out flyers for cafes, waiting tables, even cleaning apartments. But every job felt temporary, uncertain, And then one day, while walking home past a busy square, she saw a man playing guitar for tips. His case lay open, filled with coins. People actually stopped to listen. That night she made her choice. The next morning she returned to that same corner with her father's guitar. It was old and scratched, the strings slightly rusted, but it was all she had left of him. She set it down, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her first song was one her father loved, a gentle lullaby he used to hum after long days. Her voice trembled at first, but as she sang, memories flowed through her like light through stained glass. For a few minutes she wasn't just a stranger on a street corner. She was a daughter keeping her promise. But the city can be cruel to dreamers. People walked by without looking. Some stopped, not to listen, but to film her. A few laughed. Others whispered, "Another failed singer," or "She must be desperate." Each comment cut deep, but she kept singing. Because to her, music wasn't just about fame or applause. It was a prayer, a connection, the only way to feel close to her father again. Every morning she stood on the same corner, rain or shine, her fingers numb from cold, her heart heavy but steady. Some days she earned enough for a small meal. Other days not a single coin. But she never left her spot. There was rhythm in her struggle, melody in her endurance. She learned to read people's faces, to spot kindness in the crowd. A rare smile, a nod, a moment of understanding. Those fleeting moments kept her going. When loneliness crept in, she would close her eyes mid-song and imagine her father standing among the crowd, smiling proudly, whispering, "Sing for me, Clara. Don't let them silence your song." She would strum harder, her voice rising above the city noise, and for that moment, it felt like he was right there. She never blamed the world for her situation. She only wished someone, anyone, would hear her, not as a beggar, but as an artist, a dreamer still holding on. And though most people didn't notice, though many mocked, she remained. Because sometimes hope doesn't roar. It hums quietly in the heart of someone who refuses to stop singing. Day after day, she stood on that same corner, until it became part of her identity. The locals began calling her the street singer. They didn't know her name, but they knew her sound. That haunting, beautiful voice that floated through the morning air. The sky was bruised with storm clouds that evening. A cold wind swept through the narrow streets, bending umbrellas, scattering leaves, and carrying the smell of wet asphalt. Clara stood in her usual spot beneath a flickering street lamp, her guitar case open, her scarf damp, her breath visible in the air. It had been a long day. Her fingers ached from playing. Her voice, usually soft but strong, was beginning to fail her. The rain had started hours ago, thinning the crowd. Most people hurried by with their heads down, umbrellas shielding their faces. A few tossed coins without even looking. Others didn't notice her at all. Still she sang. Her song that night was one her father loved, "A Window of Light." The melody was fragile, filled with longing. But halfway through her voice cracked. The cold had numbed her throat. Exhaustion had stolen her strength. She paused, her guitar trembling in her hands. For a brief moment, the city seemed to hold its breath. Then someone shouted from across the street, "Hey, the show's over, sweetheart." Laughter followed, her cheeks burned. She looked down, heart sinking. Maybe it really was over. Maybe this was the night she should stop. She began to pack her guitar, whispering to herself, maybe tomorrow, maybe never. And that's when she saw him. A man stood a few feet away under the awning of a closed bookstore. His coat was dark, his hair damp from the rain, but his eyes, and kind and steady whiter, were fixed on her. He wasn't scrolling his phone or fumbling for coins. He was simply listening. For reasons she couldn't explain, Clara froze. Her hand stopped moving. She lifted her guitar again. The strings were slick with rainwater, her voice barely steady, but she sang anyway. It wasn't a performance this time. It was a confession. She poured her pain, her memories, her lost hopes into that final verse. The sound was raw and cracked, but honest. So honest it hurt. When she finished, the street was quiet. Only the rain spoke, tapping against rooftops and puddles. The man didn't clap. He didn't move. Then slowly he stepped forward. "You have something special," he said softly, his voice barely rising above the rain. "Don't let the world drown it." Clara blinked at him, caught between gratitude and disbelief. Special? She looked down at her tattered coat, her chipped guitar, her empty case. She laughed. Special doesn't not out of joy, but exhausted, her tone bitter. It doesn't buy food or fix guitars or make people listen. The man's eyes softened. Maybe not today, he said, reaching into his pocket. But it can, if you let it. He pulled out a small white card, plain, unremarkable except for the embossed lettering. He handed it to her carefully as if it were something fragile. She hesitated before taking it. Her fingers brushed his. They were warm despite the cold. "Come by tomorrow," he said. "My name's Daniel. I work at a recording studio nearby. We're always looking for voices like yours," and with that, he turned and walked away. No grand goodbye. No dramatic pause. Just quiet steps fading into the rain. Clara stood there for several seconds, staring after him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. A recording studio? She had heard of scams before, men promising opportunity in exchange for trust. It wouldn't be the first time someone dangled hope like bait. She looked down at the card again. The letters shimmered, faintly under the streetlight. Her first instinct was disbelief. Silverline Records was a name she had heard once before, back when she still dreamed big, back when she used to read music magazines at the library. They had produced songs that played on the radio. Real artists worked there. It couldn't be real. She turned the card over. No phone number, no false promises, just a logo. Something about its simplicity made it harder to dismiss. Still, she couldn't bring herself to believe. Why would someone like that stop for me? The rain grew heavier. She slipped the card into her guitar case, closed it, and hurried home through the narrow alleys. Her small room, tucked above a bakery, was damp and dimly lit. The smell of yeast and rain mixed in the air. She set down her guitar, hung her wet scarf, and sat by the tiny window. The card lay on the table before her like a piece of mystery. She traced the embossed logo with her fingertip. "Silverline Records," she murmured. "Yeah, right." Still, the thought refused to leave her alone. She replayed the scene in her head. The man's steady gaze, his calm voice, the sincerity that didn't feel forced. Something about him was different. He hadn't looked at her with pity or amusement. He had listened. That night, Clara barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his words again. "You have something special. Don't let the world drown it." By dawn, the card was still on her table, untouched, waiting. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. Clara rose early, feeling the soreness in her throat. She brewed a small cup of tea, stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror, and asked herself aloud, "Am I really doing this?" She almost laughed. What did she have to lose? Another disappointment wouldn't break her. She'd been broken before. She put on her cleanest clothes, a faded sweater, patched jeans, and her father's scarf. She didn't know if this meeting would lead anywhere, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt since her father's death. Hope. The studio was only a few blocks from the heart of downtown, surrounded by tall glass buildings and neon signs. The closer she got, the more her heart pounded. When she finally stood in front of the Silverline building, she froze. It was real. The name gleamed in silver letters above the glass doors. She pressed her hand against the handle and whispered, "Please, let this not be another cruel joke." Inside, the lobby smelled of coffee and fresh paper. The walls were covered in framed records, gold and platinum discs that seemed to glow under the lights. A receptionist looked up and smiled politely. "Can I help you?" I'm here to see Daniel Harris," Clara said, her voice small. "He gave me this." She held out the card. The woman glanced at it, then nodded. "He's expecting you." "Elevator, 5th floor." Clara's legs felt weak. "Expecting me?" she whispered. As the elevator doors closed, she clutched her guitar tightly to her chest. Her reflection in the mirrored wall looked nervous, fragile, but there was something fierce in her eyes. Something alive. When the doors opened, she stepped into a hallway lined with soundproof rooms. Behind one window, a singer rehearsed with headphones on. Behind another, a pianist adjusted his mic. Clara followed the signs until she reached a half-open door that read Studio B. "Daniel Harris," she knocked gently. "Come in," a voice called, and there he was, the same man from the street, only now in a clean shirt, headphones around his neck, surrounded by glowing monitors and mixing boards. He smiled when he saw her. "You came," he said simply. Clara nodded, still clutching her guitar. I wasn't sure if this was real." "It's real," Daniel said, gesturing toward a stool by the mic. Now let's see what your voice can really do. That night, Clara lay awake in her small rented room, a single bulb flickering above her, the rain tapping softly on the window. Her father's photo sat by her bedside, the edges worn, the smile faded. She whispered to it, "Dad, do I dare to hope again?" The card on the table gleamed faintly under the light. Daniel Gray, Harmony Records. It looked too clean, too good to be true. How many times had people promised her something, only to disappear? She still remembered a man who once filmed her on the street promising to make her viral. He never came back. The internet moved on, and so did everyone else. But something about Daniel felt different. Maybe it was the way he listened, really listened, as if her song meant something. By sunrise, she made her choice. She tucked the card into her coat and walked through the fog-covered streets. Every step felt heavy, every turn filled with hesitation. The city was waking up. Buses honking, shopkeepers rolling up shutters. The smell of bread and coffee in the air. The studio sat on the corner of Maple Street. Glass windows, clean white walls, a contrast to her worn-out clothes and scuffed shoes. She paused at the door, heart pounding. Inside, Daniel noticed her instantly. He smiled, not with pity but with warmth. "You came. I'm not sure why," she said softly. "Because you still believe," he replied. He led her into the main room. Cables, microphones, glowing buttons, and soft jazz playing in the background. The smell of coffee and varnished wood filled the air. She stood frozen, memories flooding back of school recitals, her father cheering from the front row. Daniel handed her a cup of tea. "Sing whatever comes to your heart." She hesitated, gripping her father's old guitar. The strings were still slightly out of tune, the wood scratched, but it was hers. The first note trembled. Her voice cracked. For a moment she thought of leaving. But then she closed her eyes, remembering her father's words. "Sing from your soul, Clara, not from fear." Her voice rose again, fragile at first, then powerful. It carried the pain of loss, the warmth of memory, the spark of hope buried deep inside her. Every lyric painted a piece of her story, the hunger, the rain, the streets, and the dreams that refused to die. When she finished, the room was silent. Daniel's eyes glistened. His assistant whispered, "She's incredible." Daniel nodded. "Raw talent. The kind you can't teach." Clara stepped back, embarrassed. "Don't flatter me. I've heard promises before." "This isn't flattery," he said firmly. "It's truth. I want you to record a demo, just one song. Let's see where it takes you." Her heart skipped. "Why me? There are better singers. People with fame, followers. They may have fans," he interrupted. "But you have a story. And stories move hearts." She wanted to believe him. But fear whispered in her ear. What if I fail again? What if this is another illusion? Still, something stronger rose within her. The same determination that had kept her singing on cold nights when no one cared. That evening, she found herself in the recording booth. The walls were padded, the air still. She wore old headphones, the mic standing tall before her. Daniel gave her a thumbs up from behind the glass. She closed her eyes and began. The song poured out. Every verse a confession, every chorus a prayer. She sang of love lost, of holding on to light when the world turns dark, of her father's dreams echoing through her. By the time the last note faded, Daniel was silent, stunned. His team exchanged glances, speechless. Clara removed the headphones slowly. "Was it okay?" Daniel smiled. "More than okay. You just told the world who you are." She laughed through tears. "It's been a long time since anyone wanted to listen." He handed her a tissue. "Get used to it, Clara, because soon the world will listen." That night, as she walked home through the city streets, the rain had stopped. The neon lights reflected on the puddles, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She hummed softly, the melody of her new song, unaware that this small act of courage would soon change everything. Daniel sat at his desk late one night, replaying Clara's recording. Her voice filled the quiet studio, soft, trembling, yet powerful enough to stir something deep in him. It wasn't polished or commercial, but it was real. It carried truth. He didn't tell Clara. He just wanted to see what would happen. By morning, the views began to climb, a few hundred, then thousands. By the next day, hundreds of thousands. The comment section exploded. "Who is she? This voice broke me." "You can feel her pain," It's not just singing, it's storytelling. Clara woke up in her small apartment, unaware of the storm her song had started. Her old phone buzzed constantly. Unknown numbers, messages, notifications. When she finally opened one, her jaw dropped. Her song was everywhere. Videos of people reacting to it, sharing it, even crying while listening. The world suddenly cared about the girl they once ignored on the streets. She ran to the studio, breathless. Daniel looked up, a grin spreading across his face. "Good morning, superstar." "You uploaded it," she gasped. He nodded sheepishly. "I couldn't keep it hidden. The world needed to hear you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Daniel, I don't know what to say." "Say thank you when you're ready to perform live," he said with a wink. Within days, news channels and magazines began calling. They wanted to interview the mysterious street singer with the golden heart. Clara couldn't comprehend it. Reporters asked about her past, her father, her struggles. She answered with humility, never hiding where she came from. "I sang because I didn't know how else to survive," she told one interviewer. "Music was the only thing that didn't leave me." Her honesty touched millions. Donations poured in from strangers, offers from music labels, fan letters filled with stories of people she had inspired. Then came Daniel's next surprise, an invitation to perform at a charity concert for underprivileged children. "It's time," he said gently. "You don't belong on the street anymore, Clara. You belong on a stage." The night of the concert arrived. The grand hall shimmered with golden lights. Backstage, Clara stood in front of a mirror, wearing a simple white dress. Her hands trembled as she fixed the strap on her guitar, the same one her father had given her, the same one she'd played on street corners. Around her, famous singers laughed, stylists adjusted lights, assistants hurried with microphones. She felt like an outsider again, small and misplaced. But when she looked at her reflection, she saw her father's eyes looking back, steady, proud, and full of belief. Daniel approached. "Nervous?" She nodded. Terrified, he smiled. "Good, it means you care." The stage manager called her name. The lights dimmed, the host's voice echoed, "Please welcome Clara," the voice that touched millions. She took a deep breath. The curtains opened. For a split second, the bright lights blinded her. Thousands of faces stared back, some curious, some expectant. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like thunder in her chest. She stepped forward, gripping her guitar. A hush fell over the hall. Then silence. The first chord echoed softly. Her voice followed, gentle, trembling. The same song that had once carried across cold, empty streets now filled a theater of warmth and wonder. As she sang, tears shimmered in the crowd. Some people closed their eyes, swaying. Others clutched their hearts. Cameras flashed, but for Clara, the world disappeared. She wasn't performing anymore. She was remembering her father's laughter, the nights she went hungry, the dreams she buried, the courage it took to keep singing when no one cared. Each verse became a chapter of her life unfolding in melody. The final note soared, soft yet powerful, and hung in the air long after her lips closed. Then silence again. For one heartbeat she feared the worst. And then, applause. A tidal wave of applause. People stood, cheered, whistled. Some cried openly. Others shouted her name. The crowd that once mocked her kind now rose for her. The girl who never stopped singing even when no one listened. Backstage, Daniel wiped a tear discreetly. He whispered to himself, "I told you, the world needed to hear her." When Clara stepped off stage, she was overwhelmed. Reporters surrounded her. Fans reached for her hand. A little girl handed her a paper flower. "You sing like my mom used to," the child said softly. Clara knelt down, smiling through tears. "Then your mom must have been amazing." That night, as she stood on the balcony of her apartment, the city light stretched out before her. The same streets where she once sang for coins now shimmered like stars. She whispered to the wind, "We did it, Dad." For the first time in forever, she didn't feel invisible. She felt alive, seen, heard. Her journey from a forgotten street corner to a grand stage wasn't luck. It was faith, perseverance, and the power of a voice that refused to be silenced. The morning after the concert, Clara woke up to a flood of messages, interview requests, talk show invitations, and calls from record labels offering contracts that could change her life overnight. For a long moment, she just sat on the edge of her bed, her guitar beside her, staring at the sunlight creeping across the floor. Fame had arrived, Loud, sudden, and dazzling. But she wasn't sure she was ready for it. Daniel called that morning. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Clara smiled faintly. "We did it." "No," he replied softly. "You did. I just helped the world listen." Within days, Clara's face appeared everywhere. Newspapers, music blogs, social media feeds. The girl with the cracked guitar had become a symbol of resilience. Crowds gathered whenever she performed. People who once hurried past her now waited for hours to hear her sing. But despite the noise of success, Clara stayed grounded. She visited her old street corner one cold afternoon, wearing a hat and scarf to stay unnoticed. The same pavement where she once stood felt strangely smaller now. A young boy sat there strumming an out-of-tune guitar. His case lay open, a few coins scattered inside. His voice was shaky but full of hope. Clara dropped a folded note into his case along with a handful of coins. He looked up, puzzled. She just smiled and whispered, "Keep singing. Don't stop, no matter who listens or doesn't." When he opened the note later, it read, "Every dream begins on a street corner. Clara." That night she called her mother, the woman who had quietly endured years of struggle. "I bought you something," Clara said shyly. Her mother laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when she arrived, she found a small house with a garden and a front porch. Simple, warm, peaceful. "It's not much," Clara said, tears in her eyes. "But it's ours." Her mother hugged her tightly. "You've given me more than I ever dreamed. Your father would be so proud." As weeks passed, Clara refused to lose herself in fame. She turned down several commercial deals that didn't align with her heart. Instead, she founded a small charity, the Street Voices Foundation. Its mission to give underprivileged kids access to free music lessons, instruments, and performance opportunities. She visited schools, performed for children, and spoke about perseverance and hope. "Music saved me," she told them. "Now it's your turn to let it save you." Her concerts weren't just glamorous shows. They were celebrations of survival, of second chances. Every time she performed, she dedicated one song to her father. "For the man who taught me that dreams don't die. They wait," she would say. Daniel stayed by her side through it all. Not as a manager chasing fame, but as a mentor and friend who believed in her purpose. Their bond grew deeper, a quiet partnership built on respect, trust, and shared gratitude. He helped her navigate the chaos of interviews and contracts, reminding her to rest, to breathe, to stay true. One evening, as they sat together in the studio where everything began, Clara strummed her guitar softly. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night to listen?" Daniel smiled. "No, because I believe I was meant to." Silence hung between them, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. It carried peace. Fame might fade, songs might end, but something inside Clara had transformed forever. She was no longer the girl who sang for coins. She was a voice of compassion, proof that kindness could change a life. As she walked out into the night, the city lights shimmered again, the same streets, but a different story. Clara looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you for giving my voice a place to belong." Years later, the world knew her name, Clara Rivera, the voice of hope. Her music had crossed borders, her songs translated into dozens of languages, yet no matter how far she went, she never forgot where her journey began. On that cold street corner, singing for strangers who never looked up. That night, she stood beneath the glittering lights of a grand awards stage. Cameras flashed. The hall was filled with stars, executives, and fans who cheered her name. When the announcer called, "And the award for Inspirational Artist of the Year goes to Clara Rivera," the crowd erupted. Clara walked slowly to the microphone, holding the golden trophy in trembling hands. For a moment, she just stood there looking at the faces before her, so different from the blurred silhouettes that once rushed past her on the street. Her voice was calm, but full of emotion. "Once," she began, "I sang on the streets for coins. Most people passed by. But one person stopped, not to give money, but to listen. And that changed everything." The audience fell silent. Even through the bright lights, Clara's gaze found Daniel in the crowd. He smiled, eyes glistening. The same kind, steady smile that "This award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever been ignored, overlooked, or told their dream was too small." Sometimes destiny doesn't shout. It whispers why through a stranger's kindness, through a moment of faith, through a single act of listening. The audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous, but Clara barely heard it. Her heart was too full. Later that night, as the ceremony ended, the lights dimmed and the stage was reset for her final performance. Clara walked out once more, holding the same old guitar, the one with the worn wood and cracked strings. The crowd gasped as she began to strum the familiar tune, her first song, the one she once sang for coins under a gray sky. But this time her voice filled a stadium, carried by warmth, gratitude, and light. Thousands of phones lit up like stars, and as she sang, tears glimmered in her eyes, because she knew her father somewhere above was listening too.